Hi, and welcome back to Gatecrashers. This week we're joined by Cavan Scott. You may know him from his work on Shadow Service at Vault Comics, or his Star Wars work and the upcoming High Republic comic from Marvel. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thanks. How are you? It's really early for you, isn't it, at the minute?
It is. I normally record around 7 or 8 p.m. This time it is a.m.
God bless the time zones, eh?
Yeah. I don't even start work for another hour or so I'm totally fine. I have coffee, so that's all that really matters.
That's good. See, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I've got coffee. I'm not sure this is a good idea, but I'll have to stop soon.
So I didn't lead with this because I wanted you to be a little unaware that I'm actually a pretty hard-hitting journalist. I always lead with my hardest question.
Okay.
What's your favorite sandwich?
Oh, that's a very good question. I have a comfort sandwich, which is very mature cheddar cheese and pickled onions. That is my sandwich where I need comfort food. I mean, Brits have a different relationship with sandwiches to Americans. I mean, you guys go, it's like the Mona Lisa of sandwiches over there. You know, there's so much stuff in them. I mean, you have to literally spear them together sometimes with a stick. We don't have that usually. But so I have quite simple taste with sandwiches. But yeah, I'm definitely a cheese guy. And if I need comfort food, that's what I go for. Cheese and onion is where I'm at.
That's such an no one has had anything near that combo, but
oh, really?
No, not at all.
It's quite a thing over here. It was growing up. When you used to go to football matches, or soccer matches, I mean football matches as they're properly called, the pub we used to go to beforehand quite often sold cheese and onion rolls, which was literally just someone had sliced an onion and shoved it in with the cheese. I say there wasn't a lot of it wasn't the most gourmet roll in the world, sandwich in the world, but I loved that, and so yeah, it's kept with me. So yeah, definitely, if it's got cheese in it, I'm happily, and the onion just adds to it.
You know, it's such a simple sandwich, but I actually am very excited to try it myself.
Give it a go.
I'm a huge onion person, so like having pickled onions it's like kicking it into overdrive.
Yeah. Oh, and sometimes you can, if you want to get creative with it, you can, grate the cheese, put it in mayonnaise, put the onions in with the mayonnaise. There are variations. Put some lettuce in there as well. But I'm a simple man with simple taste sometimes. And Sunday night, if it's been one of those weekends, you'll usually find me in front of the telly with a cheese and pickled onion sandwich. I'm not sure what that says about me, but
listen,
that's the way it is.
Everybody likes what they like. So before we get into a little bit about Shadow Service, there's something that I had to ask up front. What made you want to write Jaxxon of all the Star Wars characters? What made him like he's like your character because you're the person writing him?
I think, someone said the other day that I've now written Jaxxon more than anyone else in the universe, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. But the reason is because he was there at the beginning of me in Star Wars, because I didn't see the films first. I read the Marvel comic first. So back end of the 70s, I'm a young kid. Marvel UK, which was a huge thing over here, used to print loads of weekly comics, which would sort of split up Marvel's monthly series from the States. And it would range from everything, from the usual superhero fare to things like Star Wars. So there was Star Wars Weekly. And I picked up the I can literally reach across my desk because it's never far away from me because I found it recently, so it's on my bookshelf. Issue 16, which was May the 24th, 1978, and it was the The first issue I picked up, it was the issue when Han gets together the team, and Jaxxon is one of them. So he's there on the cover. I knew what Star Wars was. I was too young to see Star Wars. I think I was too scared to see Star Wars because I grew up loving monsters, but I was also absolutely terrified of them. So some of the things I'd seen in Star Wars on, in stills and stuff were a bit freaky for me. So I didn't go and see the first one in the cinema. But I knew it was because obviously I had some of the toys, or my friends had the toys as well, and I had the storybook of the first film as well, which I must admit I hadn't given a lot of notice to until I picked up that issue of Star Wars Weekly, which has Jaxxon on the front cover. So for me, he was more of an impact. And that entire team that Han puts together are more of an impact than Luke and Leia, because I hadn't actually encountered them yet properly. So that was my in to Star Wars. And I then got that every week. And obviously he vanishes quite quickly. But there was part of me I was very upset when I saw Empire that he wasn't in it. And now I've been able to rectify that because from a certain point of view, the Empire Strikes Back edition, which comes out when we're recording this next week, I was able to write a Jaxxon story and put him in the movie. So I feel that 40 years ago I was very angry, and now I've been able to put that right. So yeah, he's been there all the way through. I was very upset when I found out that people didn't like him because for me, he was just there, and it got to the point when I was like, people would argue about, well, why would you have a big green rabbit? Like, why would you have a fish that's an admiral? We accept him. We love him. He's a fish in a spaceship. I can believe in Admiral Akbar. I love Admiral Akbar, but for the same reason, I love a giant green rabbit with blasters, because let's face it, what's not to love about that?
That is so, like, I got the early edition of Point of View from Del Rey, but I was reading it last night and I loved it, but now knowing that, like, you got to fix what you loved is awesome.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it was one of those moments where all the way through with Jaxxon, I've been saying they're not going to let me do this, and then they've let me do it, and that was the final one. I'm not sure where I go with Jaxxon now, because I feel like my 10-year-old or whatever it was self is now going, well done,
you did it,
you've done it now, you can relax,
And that's also so interesting to me, because our whole show is about helping people find a place to get into things. And hearing someone who got into the Star Wars universe through the weekly is not just wild. It's like you're helping build the next part of the universe in general. So that's very cool to hear and very inspiring.
It's why I love the Star Wars comics, because as I say, it was my way. I mean, Marvel UK, I was nuts for it. I don't think anyone who's not over here. I mean, Marvel weekly comics in the UK were massive. We used to have loads of humour titles growing up, and the most famous one is the Beano, which has been around sort of nearly 80 years, and they would be made up of sort of like one-page, funny stories with recurring characters. Then you'd have things like 2000 AD, which gave us Judge Dredd. And you'd have Marvel UK. Now, there was DC stuff, but I didn't really know DC at the time because they didn't have the same reach over here, because Marvel UK just pumped these things out every week. And the clever thing they did, moving from the 70s into the 80s as well. So in the back of Star Wars Weekly, you had Star-Lord, because it had the word star in the title. When you got to Transformers UK, the weekly, which was a massive part of if you're a Transformers fan, you've probably seen some of the stuff that's come out of the Transformers Weekly, because they ran out of pages to reprint because it was so popular. So they had to put stories in between the American editions, which has led to loads of the canon. In the back of Transformers, they had Machine Man, because he's a machine, right? And so there was all these backup strips which introduced me to areas of the Marvel universe which were probably not, let's face it, Machine Man, great though he is not up there as an A-lister. I remember getting Secret Wars Weekly, which introduced me to so many Marvel heroes I'd never seen before. But what really kept me coming back every month or every week was the fact they serialized Alpha Flight in the back. And so for me, and for an entire generation, Alpha Flight is more important than the Avengers, because we didn't really have an Avengers comic, but we had a comic that each week, even though it had Avengers in the main title, had Alpha Flight in it. And so Alpha Flight was massively important to me, more than the X-Men or anything, because it was an introduction into sort of a Marvel team. Because the comics I've been reading up to them were things like Spider-Man, which were more of obviously an individual hero. So yeah, Marvel UK, hats off to them at that time. They were incredible, and I don't think I would be into comics, and I don't think I would really have my job if it wasn't for reading those weekly comics, which we all read and then passed to each other and swapped around.
That's such an interesting point of view, because I've only really spoke to people in the US who dealt with comics and how they got into it, but seeing the serialized versions is awesome, just because I know it's kind of making a comeback with different anthologies and stuff like that. And I know
I mean, I'm a massive fan of those. I mean, yeah, so you can imagine it was like, so yeah, it split things, in half, literally. So you get 10 pages of Spider-Man, and then you would get a backup of something from like The Hulk or The Thing or Marvel 2-in-1s or something, which would again be split as well. When they did Secret Wars, I mean, that went on for years over here, because obviously they serialized the original Secret Wars, and then when it got to Secret Wars 2, they serialized Secret Wars 2, and they serialized all the backups as well, and all the tie-ins. So you suddenly had... Sorry, my computer's played up at me. You suddenly had a couple of issues of Iron Man or Power Pack or and then go back to the next issue of Secret Wars. It was a really clever way of doing it. And so suddenly we were all dropped into the Marvel universe in a way that didn't really exist with the DC side of things. I had to go and find DC. I had to find comic stores to actually find the DC universe, which in its way made that quite an interesting way in, because it became something that lots of people knew about Marvel in the UK, but the DC universe was a bit more of a mystery unless you went and found it. So yeah, it was a really interesting way to get into superhero comics.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you stuck around, and now you're kind of one of the people creating it, which is awesome. So I wanted to chat a little bit about Shadow Service.
Yes.
As I was reading it, the first couple of pages feel like this modern noir story. I'm like, oh, like she's in this bar. This is going to be kind of hard boiled. And then she goes out into the alley and meets Eddie. And Eddie is a talking rat. Was this a sudden shift intentional for you? Just to introduce your world and kind of flip things on its head?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of your sort of Neil Gaiman-esque, neverwhere kind of stories. I think they're a massive part of British fantasy, and definitely a part of my upbringing and getting into fantasy and horror were those kind of Hammer House of Horror type anthology shows and things like that, where you have the mundane and the horrific or the fantastic operating side by side, and Doctor Who as well. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so obviously was a massive Star Wars fan, but you had by law to be a massive Doctor Who fan as well in the 70s. And in the 70s, Doctor Who was largely about, things that shouldn't be scary being scary, because, that when Doctor Who is the best, it's where shop dummies are aliens hiding to get you and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely stuck with me, and was a massive influence. There was another, again, I talked about the weeklies. There was a 2000 AD alike for horror called Scream, which didn't last that long. It got into lots of trouble with controversy about its content. But part of that, one of the strips in that was the Dracula file, which was a modern day Dracula story where Dracula comes over to the UK, a KGB agent goes to his superior and said, shouldn't we warn the British that the Lord of Darkness is there? And they go, well, no, don't be stupid. He's going to destroy them all. Fantastic. And so the KGB agent defects so he can come and track down Dracula, and I read this every week and I absolutely loved it, and it had a major influence when I was putting together stories which eventually became Shadow Service. The funny thing is that this year I've written the sort of conclusion to Dracula Files for Rebellion, for a Scream revival, and so it's all come about full circle while I've been writing Shadow Service, which is quite odd, really.
That's wild. You're really taking all of your things that you loved as a kid and you're just driving them home.
Oh, absolutely. My to-do list is exactly the same as when I was 10. And may that continue. And I think, especially when you're writing things like Star Wars, or, you know, when you're doing something that's obviously a little bit more adult like Shadow Service, you've got to tap into that, because that's where you get excited. And I think most geeks like us are the most excited when we remember what it's like to be excited as a kid. And it doesn't matter what your content you're consuming, and how, you know, adult or not that content is. It's that excitement you have of the next issue of a comic or a film coming out or the latest toy coming to the local toy store. I think that's so important for us in this business, to always try and remember that, because it can get very serious at times, but I think you always have to have that moment of childlike glee, not childish glee, but childlike glee, with something that's happening.
Yeah, especially because with these things that you're creating, you have the power to help someone else feel that, and then they continue the cycle, and then they're like, oh, I really want to continue this series when they're a writer later in their life. So with all of that, did you feel you had a little bit more freedom to experiment more in something like Shadow Service rather than something that's like a set IP like a Star Wars?
Yeah, absolutely. It was so I've been writing IP stuff for 20 years now, and I love it and enjoy it. But you know, but I've been pushing into writing more of my own, you know, creator and stuff over the last. And at first it's terrifying, because you go, well, where's the Bible? Where are the notes? You know, where's the point we've got to get to? And, you know, everyone looks back to you and, well, you tell us. And you go, oh yeah, it's me, isn't it? And so, yeah, there is that thing that when you're working in an IP, you have boundaries, and those boundaries force you to be creative, to tell good stories. When you're coming up with something new, you literally have to put the boundaries in yourself, because otherwise you can just do anything. And I think that is quite terrifying. And it's been so, I've enjoyed it so much because of that. And yeah, I mean, I've tried to put boundaries in myself, because otherwise I think I'd go too far off any kind of road. But yeah, no, it's been great, and working with the team on Shadow Service, it's been a complete and utter joy to create something new from scratch. And it's one of a number of things I'm working on as well, most of which haven't been announced yet, of more creator-owned stuff. So yeah, I'm liking the balance. I think I'll always be wanting to write license and IP work, but at the same point, you know, this has been where I've been trying to work towards. So it's very satisfying to see happening in the minute.
Oh, that's awesome. And with that ability to kind of do your own thing, what kind of research did you put behind Gina's powers? Just because, to me, someone who doesn't understand magic or even go towards it, it seemed like, quote unquote, realistic for like a power. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all getting back to my to-do list. I've been obsessed about folklore and all of these things for years. And so I do feel I've been researching this book for most of my adult life, as I've sort of been, you know, I go around, I'm one of those people who go to a new place, back when we could go to new places, and go into the bookshops and find the little pamphlets about the legends and ghost stories of this area and the folklore. And so a lot of it has come from the stuff I read for A, fun, and now B, for work. So yeah, that's where a lot of it originates from. And obviously then you try and put your own twist on it.
So in the story, there's section 626, MI 666, and it seems intentional that they're not really seen as just outright good guys.
No.
What made you want to make that sort of ambiguous with how they operate?
because that's what the world is like. I'm a big fan of espionage films. I'm a massive fan of Bond, but obviously it goes far beyond Bond when you talk about these stories and these tropes, and when you look into a more sort of like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, John le Carre world, you do get into that. But these are massive shades of grey. These people are doing things that they have to be comfortable with the fact that they're protecting the world by doing things that people would say are wrong. And so I wanted to explore that, and I wanted to explore a group of quite broken people who have to literally stand in the way of darkness, and how dark they are themselves to do it. And yeah, it's all too easy to make the characters like this, be a very patriotic, flag waving, good guys. But has its place, but it wasn't that kind of story. And the long form story, if we want what we want to tell beyond this run, hopefully it's going to last longer than the 10 issues we've got planned. We'll really explore that and explore what Gina the main character of Gina, what difference she'll make to these people who have been living in a bubble of their own making for so long now, and literally living in the shadows where they haven't had to interact with people from the outside world.
And that is interesting that you mentioned the ongoingness of it, because it felt like so far it's felt like a first arc of a series. Like I want to see more. So in your mind, you do want to continue the story past the miniseries. Yeah.
So we have 10 issues planned at the minute, and then it is a case of seeing how it goes. And I am in the process of writing issue 10 at the minute, and it's going to be the kind of thing where it will tell a story that will be complete, but then it's going to have lots of questions that hopefully will lead our stories. It's not a story that I think will run indefinitely. If it succeeds in that way, we have a definite end in mind. But we definitely hope that there's going to be a longer road to get to that point.
And something that stuck out, and I think it was the latest issue about the Section 26 van that rolls up.
Yes.
The fact that it's bigger on the inside.
Yes.
That has to be a reference, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely. And I mean, in the original draft, there was a line that was taken out where Gina turns around to Hex, who's the spy master, and says, "Who do you think you are, David Bloody Tennant?" And unfortunately, we had to cut that just for space, and it killed me. But yeah, no, it's absolutely. I mean, again, you look at the John Constantine TV show they did, as part of the Arrowverse thing. He has a house that's bigger on the inside. It's an old magical trope that internal dimensions can be expanded. And at the end of the day, and this is why I upset quite a lot of my Doctor Who fellow fans, I still believe that Doctor Who is more science fantasy and science fiction, and the TARDIS is a magical thing rather than an actual scientific thing. So I know I can hear people sharpening their knives, and I've had this debate on panels before. The Doctor is a wizard. She has a magic wand. They can do incredible things, and they have a box that's bigger on the inside, and it can travel anywhere. That's magic. And they even they deal with it in the show. It's the old rule that someone's magic is just a form of science that we don't understand yet. And if the Time Lords are anything, I think that's what it is. So yeah, it is a bit of a tip of a hat to it that where I came from, the first stuff I started to write with Doctor Who, and I'm glad people are taking for it in the spirit that it's meant, and it will hopefully, as time goes by, be a location we're returning to, and there are in-story ramifications for the place as well. So yeah, it is a bit of a tribute, but when you're writing these things, you've got to have. I'm all for wearing my influences on my sleeve, and then perhaps doing something different with them.
Yeah, I mean, the inside of it is wild. Like seeing some of the stuff in there is like, whoa, the art on the book is incredible.
Corin is amazing, and all the stuff with the big statues, the skull statues, that's Corin. You know, I knew she liked drawing demons. It was only the issue 2 that I realized how much she liked drawing demons, and so the demon count has gone up issue on issue. The statues are absolutely something she added that weren't in the script, and I will quite happily say that. And they do play out now. You know, it was one of those wonderful moments when you're working on a team and the story's got to go somewhere, and you'll find a way of doing it, and you don't quite know how you're going to do it, and then another member of the team provides something, and the skull statues absolutely provide that link. I was like, oh, that's who they are. So yeah, and that's why I love working in comics, because it is it's a joint creation. And yeah, Corin's detail she puts in pages is intense, and I am constantly writing in the script, please don't kill yourself or destroy your hands. Because there are moments where she's just started work on issue 6, which is takes the team overseas, and it's to a location where I knew the detail was going to be wild. So I have again tried to temper this in the script. But then the previous issue, they go into a pub, which should have been the most basic place for them to go, and it's the most detailed panel in the world, and it's like a fifth of a page. It's not, it's ridiculous. There's even sort of stuff on the walls that's from my house, that she's put in there as a joke. And it's so, yeah, she's great. We were put together on the book by Volt. We'd worked together before. And it was one of those moments when it was a real sort of, head desk. Why didn't I think of Corin when I was coming up with this? It just seems to make so much sense. And now I can't imagine doing it with anyone else, because, she's so much part of it.
I always love hearing how people collaborate. So that's awesome. And I know you did mention the science fantasy thing, and I do think Star Wars is that as well. So you've worked on pretty much 2 of the biggest IPs for that genre ever, Doctor Who and Star Wars. How did you approach working on Star Wars rather than Doctor Who? What were the differences in the themes and writing for you?
Well, Star Wars has far less whimsy, even though it does have giant green rabbits in it, but the whimsy is strong in Doctor Who. You can get away with things in that very British tongue-in-cheek fancy way. I think Doctor Who can absolutely break your heart, and it should at points. But that fundamentally there is whimsy at the side of it, at the centre of it, which is along the route, the same lines as Alice in Wonderland and the mainstay of British fantasy. With Star Wars, obviously, I always try to remember that Star Wars is fun, and Star Wars is an adventure. And again, there are moments when you're trying to make your reader really feel, but then you want to remember what it was like, as I said earlier on, to be that 10, 12-year-old kid sitting in a cinema and seeing the Death Star blow up, or hearing Darth Vader's rasp and feeling a chill. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the differences. Star Wars is about high adventure. It's about characters in that high adventure. I remember when the trailer for The Force Awakens came out, and I loved it because it was Star Wars, but I don't know if you remember, that first trailer didn't really have, or the first teaser didn't really have much in the way of character. It was just ships. And ships are obviously a massive part, and anyone who sees my Lego posts on Instagram know that I'm constantly making Lego ships. But obviously the characters are the thing that keep us coming back, and I was very happy when the next trailer had people in it. But yeah, it is the adventure of those people in Star Wars in a way that I think it is more so than Doctor Who.
Yeah, I did not know you built those Legos. I always try to get them.
Oh, I do.
and then I'm like, where am I going to put them? I don't have any room for...
Oh, no, this is my problem. I literally have no space. And I've got a pile, and I think I've got a problem, to be honest. I got the 1989 Batwing the other day.
That I'm jealous. Very jealous.
I know. Because I didn't get the Batmobile because 1989 Batman is right up there. It's one of my peaks. But my theory was with the Batmobile, it's black and it's just going to collect dust even more than my other Lego models to collect dust, which are largely lighter colours that I can wipe quickly. But then the Batwing, I was like, oh, well, where does he get those wonderful toys? I have to get that. And the fact you can mount it on the wall, so it's automatically saying, this is where you're going to store it. I have a bit of space. I'm hoping it's going to fit. But yeah, no, I'm obsessed with Lego. I'm sitting here at my desk and I'm looking up and I've got the Return of the Jedi Emperor's throne room to build. I've got a Lego. I can't even tell what that is. This is awful. A Lego ship in a bottle to build. Yeah, there's a lot.
Did you? And then go ahead.
No, I was going to say the one thing I said this year I wasn't going to get was the Lego Advent Calendar, the Star Wars, because I've been doing that for years. I bought them for my kids and they just gave up, so I just used to carry on. And I post them on, every day and try and guess what some of this stuff is. And this year I said I wasn't going to get it. And then the day before lockdown, I went into our local toy shop and it was there. And I justified going, well, we're going in lockdown tomorrow. I'll need to do something in December. And I walked into the door at home and I was like, great news. And my wife was like, oh, yeah, marvellous. But, it'll keep me happy. It'll keep me off the streets.
You know what? I'm probably going to order that tonight just because I need the Poe Dameron sweater. I
know, especially after seeing the trailer for Lego Holiday Special.
It looks awesome. I'm so excited. Especially, okay, one more. Because Baby Yoda and everyone's going to interact. I'm so excited for that. I'm a big prequel era fan. And because that's what I grew up with, my first Star Wars movie, other than seeing the remaster, whatever you want to call them, what was Phantom Menace? So seeing droids and stuff like that always gets me so giddy. When we went to Galaxy's Edge, we were walking around, and in one of the parts, there's an old battle droid in a cave.
There is,
and I saw it. It's we went when the crack of dawn, so it's 7 a.m. and I just beelined, not realizing I was cutting through people's pictures, and I just had to be in front of that thing. So that's always exciting. Did you get the Razor Crest Lego?
Yes. That in a minute is on the top of a cupboard in the kitchen. Oh, I'm telling you, I got the Jurassic Park T-Rex and gates, but I haven't built the gates because to be fair, I bought it for the T-Rex. And so she's standing on the bookcase my wife has to cope with so much. Yeah. She's in the bookcase in the lounge. If you go, in the hallway. Also in the hallway is Yoda's Jedi Starfighter. If you go to the downstairs bathroom, there's Doctor Strange's Santorum on top of a shelf next to Thor's ship. I'm looking around here. I've got an A-wing, Anakin's experimental starfighter from the Clone Wars, various things from Tatooine, because I said I was only going to limit myself to Tatooine sets, and then they've just released that big cantina set, which I cannot justify. But it's how dare they?
The yacht is what I was looking at the yacht.
That's here. I'm telling you, it's that's next to the Penguin's car from the Lego Batman movie. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm looking at
the Jurassic Park thing it's funny because I stood in front of the Lego store window for quite a long time thinking I can justify this purpose because I'll have the Jurassic Park gate. That's what I really wanted. And you wanted the dinosaurs. So
well, I could, the gate's still in the box. And only because I don't know where I'm going to put it. That's the thing. I bought, it's an obsession. It's, I don't have many these days, and but the 1966 Batcave that now lives in the loft because I had to remove it to put something else up there.
Got to remove furniture.
It was You go up in the loft. You go up the loft hatch, and there's a little shelf, and the 1966 Batcave looks back at you. And so, yeah, it's going to be. If I bring too much more into the house, I think my wife is going to start legal proceedings.
Well,
but, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on from Lego,
sorry.
No, it's fine. With the modern Star Wars, we're kind of exploring a lot more genre stuff with the different fiction. And I know you've done the Vader's Castle stories, which have more of like a horror aspect to them. How do you do horror for a young reader as opposed to something like Shadow Service, which has a lot of horror elements with being able to have a lot more gruesome art? How do you balance those?
Well, I think the first bit there is, we can go full out gore in Shadow Service. I'm not saying Shadow Service is a proper Fangora gore fest, but it borders on. Mainly because again, it's something that Corinne absolutely loves, and something so if I put anything in that's in any way gory, she will turn it up to 11. And so I'm leaning into that more and more. With Star Wars, I think the important thing is with all the IDW stuff, and for the people who don't know, I've been writing sort of Star Wars Adventures for IDW as well for the last few years, which is their all-age book. And I think that's the important thing, is that they're not. People look at the IDW Star Wars stuff and think, oh, that's the kids' comics. And yeah, kids can read them, but that's not really the point. The point is they are supposed to be all ages. They're supposed to be stories that, anyone can read. And absolutely, when we were given the go-ahead to do the first Vader's Castle miniseries, I made it clear that I wanted it to be something that was, proper horror, he says, doing inverted speech marks, within, within that all-age market. Because again, I think this is something from my history, something from Brit literature, is that British kids stuff has been absolutely terrifying in the past. And when I was growing up, Doctor Who was a horror show. It was absolutely the why you watched it was the monsters. The cliche over here is that you watched it from behind the sofa because you were scared. We used to have choose your own adventure books called Fighting Fantasy, which was set in a sort of like Dungeons and Dragons-esque world that were absolutely terrifying. I mean, the illustrations in that for a kid's book were hanged people talking, and the TV at the time, there was kids shows which were about standing stones and children's stones, the one I'm thinking of, and people were turning into monoliths and stuff. And yeah, kids stuff was scary, and I'm a big believer in that. I don't know necessarily if it's translated across the Atlantic sometimes, but I was convinced that if we did Vader's Castle, there had to be elements in there. While you would not absolutely try and traumatize a child who was reading it, you still want to challenge them, and I think that's why Vader's Castle has been the success it's turned into. Because I think it shocked people when they thought, oh, this is going to be like Scooby-Doo horror. And while I have no problem with Scooby-Doo horror and long may it last, it was, we wanted to make it something that anyone could pick up. And if you like horror and you like your Star Wars with a horror tinge, you would get something out of it. And I think that became clear when we announced the artists that we were working with. That they were people who, were straight off the back of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or Francesco, and I think that that put everything in. I think when people saw the Ewok story from the first series, I think they realised what we were doing. They let me do the Wicker Man with Ewoks. I mean, it's. Yeah, there was an iteration when it was the Wicked Man because it was set after Return of the Jedi, but we then pushed it further. I know, if only we could have stuck with it. But yeah, we moved everything back a bit. And so, it's you have to be responsible. You have to remember who the audience could be. But I think you also have to remember that kids like this stuff. They like being creeped out. Not all kids, but a lot of kids. They like the gory stories that they hear in history. They like, they like monsters. They like feeling safely scared. And I think it's an important thing as well. Good horror stories teach you how to be frightened in the right way growing up. And yes, that's very, for me, it's really important.
And I'm still kind of taken aback about the Doctor Who stuff because I've read articles where people say it was scary, but like growing up, the only Doctor before Modern Who was Tom Baker. Like I saw it on PBS all the time. I loved him, but it's not like I ever saw it as something scary because I guess I've been more exposed to horror my whole life. So it's very interesting to think of it that way.
Well, because, I mean, obviously, it's very much the time. You look back now to the Tom Baker years, and the effects are, let's face it, dodgy. But you had people ripping their face off to, reveal that there are massive worms underneath it with a single eye in the middle of the worms. That's horror. They blatantly stole from Hammer as well. I mean, there's Frankenstein stories, there's Dracula stories, there's mummy stories during the Tom Baker era. It was gothic, and so absolutely. It was Monster of the Week stuff, and it was my entrance into so much horror. Because of the Frankenstein story, I knew what Frankenstein was, obviously, but it sort of led me into Frankenstein. It led me to Hammer Horror, because I wanted to find out what these things were that they were riffing off. And so for me, Hammer and Doctor Who are so interchangeable, also because they quite often star the same stars. People who were in Hammer and Amicus movies were also in Doctor Who. I mean, Tom Baker is in one of the greatest Amicus movies ever, The Vault of Evil, and playing an artist who messes around with voodoo and starts to paint people and then kill them through his paintings. And because I watched that because it was Tom Baker, the Doctor's in it, and so massive crossover for people of the generation who were growing up in the late 70s, early 80s. I think there's not many of those who don't now like horror because of Doctor Who.
Yeah. And so we've only been doing this for about 2 years, and my interviewing skills get a little better each time, but I just have to say this end of this question gives me two paths to my next one. I can talk about Tom Baker joining Star Wars with Rebels, or the other route I'm going to take is talking about Trandoshans, because the original costume is a reused Doctor Who prop. I'm a huge Trandoshan and Faline fan. Like that, those are my Star Wars species.
Yeah.
And you are introducing Skier. How do you say it?
Skier.
I think I said it right when we were talking before. So I would kick myself if I didn't ask you about Skier. I know in other interviews you said that he's gruff and opinionated, but also loyal. I was curious if he's like a warm character with some humor, or is he more like a brooding type?
Depends who he is with. He is a different, like all of us, and we're all different depending on who we're with. He's different when he's with his soon-to-be former Padawan, Keith Trennis. But Skier has reasons to brood in the story we're telling. We join him at a point in his life where things are going to start changing very quickly. And so, you get the feeling there's probably a little bit of Worf in my creation of Skier. I mean, when the Next Generation came out, I loved the fact there was a Klingon on the bridge. And I loved, Michael Dorn's portrayal of Worf. And again, Worf can be very different to very, different characters. I mean, he ends up with Deanna Troi for a bit. No one would have seen that coming. And other times he can be, really angry and really cross with everyone and not happy at all. That was the kind of character that I wanted to explore with Skier. I mean, he came from a bit of concept art. When we were doing the original rundown of what would become the High Republic, Phil Noto did some amazing concept art. I think I've talked about it before in other things, but the five of us involved all came up with a different pitch of what Project Luminous, as it was then, would be. And one of those was my one, which is what became the High Republic, which is then we sort of pulled apart and put back together as a group, bringing bits from everyone's pitches and putting it into that original pitch. And Phil was there, and he did a bit of concept art for each of our story ideas, and then we basically got him going on that. And he did this when we first discussed the High Republic. He just did this. I mean, it's the bit of art that's out there of a group of Jedi all standing in a line with their sabers. And it's a piece of art which I became massively obsessed about, because none of those characters existed in the storyline. It was literally Phil just coming up with what he would like to see. And it became a bit of a mission of mine to go through each of those characters and give them a story. And one of them was a Trandoshan Jedi, which I just thought was genius. And it sort of meshed. Again, it's that thing earlier on when I was talking about Corrin. It's that I had an idea for a character, but I didn't have a species for them. And Phil provided that species. And it meant that the story went a very interesting way. I mean, people are now looking at that bit of art and going, when are we meeting all these characters? And most of them, they'll meet. There's the one in the middle who's the blonde female who everyone thinks is Ava Chris, who's the lead character in Charles Soule's novel. And that's not Ava Chris, but, people will find out. And yeah, so I just found it fascinating to have a character. I don't like mono cultures, which Star Wars is full of. I don't like mono planets where it's the ice planet or I like weather. And yeah, I like the idea that you meet, and it happened in the expanded universe. We met, Hutts that were Jedi and things like that. So I like to have, Star Wars is based on monocultures, but I think you can play with those. And the High Republic should be a time where people don't take your species as a label, and the Jedi of the High Republic should accept anyone, because let's face it, when they join the Jedi, they are babies. So, their culture is the Jedi from that point on. So, but the same point I like to explore through these characters, the fact that perhaps they are interested about where they've come from as well. This is a different era of Jedi. It's an era of Star Wars where the galaxy is more open, and the Jedi are more open as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to explore some of these characters and their understanding of where they come from and what that means to them now.
Interesting. And will he be a big part of your series?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And he's become a bigger part of it as well. He, until very late in the process, he wasn't Kiranis's master. She had another master, and it was one of those moments when you sort of hit yourself and go, why have I got that character when I already have this one over here who needs a bigger part in the story and actually can provide that role. And again, you have those moments when it works after that. So yeah, when we start the series, Keeve is a Padawan with Skier, and it's no secret we've talked about this. She, as the series goes on, she becomes knighted, and it's her. You see the High Republic through her eyes, and you get to explore what it's like to be a Padawan, and then move away from your master, but still work with them every day. Because it is a group book, it's going back to what I was saying earlier on about comics. It's a team book. So she is working alongside the person who's trained her, and working alongside as a peer at that point. So yeah, there's lots of things we can do with them. That's all.
That's big for me. Just because when all that concept art came out, my brother, who I co-host the show with, I texted him immediately because of the Wookiee. He has been obsessed with, and I can't remember his name, the Jedi Padawan from the Clone Wars, who was a Wookiee.
Yes.
It's his favorite Jedi. And I was like, Jake, he's in like 3 things. How is he your favorite? But I get it, because like I love these weird off characters as you do. So seeing a Trandoshan not as a ultra-violent bounty hunter is going to be awesome. So with the I know Project Luminous and all that, how much input did everyone get to have on this sort of new era of the universe?
Oh, absolutely loads. I mean, it was amazing how much leeway we were given in those early days to just create. And obviously then you have to rein stuff in, because it is part of the universe and part of the galaxy. So there are other things happening in Star Wars that, you have to then go, well, we could do that, but to be fair, that's happening in The Mandalorian, or this is happening over there. And so you have to temper what you're doing, so you're part of the bigger story. But it was those opening days when we were over at Skywalker Ranch. It was the 5 of us, 5 Lucasfilm calls us the story architects, which is a phrase I railed against at first. It's like, I'm just a storyteller, but we did. The reason they said it's because we are, the five of us were building something, but it wasn't just the five of us, because in that room there was also all of Story Group. There were all of the editors from Lucasfilm. There's obviously Mike Seglain, who's he was our Nick Fury. He got us together. He assembled the group, and it was incredible. The first thing we did was the first morning they showed us the plans for The Mandalorian. They showed us the plans for episode 9 and other things that are going on. And so it was just that moment when you're sitting there going, oh no, they're actually telling us this stuff. Should we leave? Do you want me to go outside?
Put earmuffs on, like.
Yeah, exactly. And then you realise that the next part of the conversation is like, okay, what are you doing? But it was good because it did balance it, because we could build off other stuff that was happening, and we could you realise that you are part of a big interrelated fictional universe. So yeah, but they have let us really run wild with a lot of it, and and that era is absolutely what started to come out of those conversations.
That's that whole thing is so exciting to me, just because like everyone knows 2020 has been an extremely long year, but
hasn't it?
This whole thing has been like one of the bright lights at the end of the tunnel, just because I'm so excited for different types of Jedi. So I do have to ask you one more question before you go.
Okay.
If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
Okay, so it's been this week while we're recording this, I've been refreshing news sites quite a lot, and I think everyone can probably realise why. But I think what I would need is something to stop me hitting my email button to see if I've got any new emails when I'm working, or Twitter, or I've removed all notifications from my computers, my phones, my iPads and everything. So I'm very much of the belief that when you work on something and you're writing something, you should shut yourself off, shut the door virtually and physically. Right. I am a nightmare for going, just look at Twitter. No, just look at Instagram. Just look at my email. So what I need is when my finger starts going towards that, or I start pushing my mouse towards that it sets off a big machine that pushes lots of levers and is connected to a boxing glove, which then punches me in the face. So it's that kind of, it's a training mechanism. So it's like a training an animal, that, well, I'm going to look at my email. There you are. I've been punched. So because, to be honest, when I go onto Twitter, sometimes it is a bit of a punch when you see some of the arguments that are going on there. So if I can get that pain beforehand, it would help. It's funny because those machines, I talked about the sort of humor comics over here. One of the one that's the only one last one standing is the Beano, which has been going for 80 years or so. I wrote for the Beano for years, and I wrote a character called Roger the Dodger. And Roger's entire stick is the fact that he's very lazy. So to get out of work, creates these really elaborate dodges so he doesn't have to do the chore. And in doing so, works much harder than he'd ever need to if he actually just did the washing up. So I wrote those for about 2 years, and that's probably the most work I've ever had to put into stories, because they're really plot intensive and they're only 2 pages long every week. So I definitely like those ideas, because I could just slap myself and say, don't look at email, Scott, whack. But no, I do like the idea that a Joker-esque boxing glove on an arm would come in and punch me in the face.
It would have to watch out for all the Legos, though.
It would, because it hit those. Can you imagine that? So actually, every time I look at Lego, someone knocks my Jabba Palace off the shelf.
Oh, that hurts me personally, because I love Jabba.
Yeah. So imagine, that's it.
Yeah,
someone smashes my Lego every time I look at. Oh, that's nasty.
Oh, yeah. Don't let your wife hear this one.
No. I'm gonna pretend this podcast never happened.
Well, I'm very thankful I had you on. This was great. Where can people find you?
My website is cavanscott.com. You can find me at Twitter at Cavan Scott. As I say, I'm there far too much. But yeah, that's probably the best two places to go and find me. Or you could go to if you're interested in the Star Wars side of it, there's a High Republic microsite as part of the StarWars.com site as well.
Thank you for coming on. This is
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week.
Precautions.